Let's generate our motivation before we begin. So yesterday when I was giving the interview for wisdom, he asked about Chandrakirti's 3 types of compassion. So we were talking about that, and that teaching really resonates with him and me and has a very strong impact. And then today, talking about Shantideva's text, and then looking back and seeing how many of the lineage masters contributed teachings on bodhicitta, all approaching it from slightly different angles, but all these different angles coming together to really give us a very full understanding of what bodhicitta means. So when we think about the efforts of the lineage lamas to do this, their kindness, their enthusiasm for bodhicitta, then that also encourages our enthusiasm and inspiration to generate it. And especially then if we recall what Shantideva has been telling us about the benefits of bodhicitta, then it's really extraordinary. You can kind of imagine being seated in the midst of all these lineage lamas, and they're talking to you all at once from all sides, saying bodhicitta, bodhicitta, and giving us teachings, and really encouraging us in that quite stupendous thought. And the more we attempt to generate bodhicitta, even going in small steps, the closer our mind becomes to the minds of these great masters and the mind of the Buddha himself. So if we want to be close to our teachers and close to the Buddha, generating bodhicitta is the way to do it. So in that way, take a moment and generate the bodhicitta motivation. It just really hit me, kind of looking back and, where did Shantideva's teachings come from? Nagarjuna was the first one who talked about the Tonglen, and then Kamalashila was the one who wrote about the 7 cause and effect instructions. Then we have all the Kadampa Geshis, teaching us. And of course, Tsongkhapa and His Holiness, and, they're all kind of steering us in that direction. Steering us, maybe pushing us, inspiring us, giving us a kick in the tush to get going. Yeah. But it's really kind of beautiful, and how you can take the teachings from all these different masters and put them together in your practice, So even in one meditation session, you start out looking at bodhicitta this way, and then you add this component and that component, and then you wind up with those 10 vows of Vasubandhu, remember? That are just so amazing. And then wait till you get until volume 6, and there's a lot of citations in there from the Sutra on the 10 Grounds, where they talk about the Buddha, or all the Bodhisattvas, as they're going through the 10 Grounds, and, what they're able to realize due to their bodhicitta and wisdom. Quite amazing. So we are almost finished with the first chapter. We're getting there. And then we'll go into the second chapter today. Okay, so we had finished talking about the benefits of aspiring bodhicitta and engaging bodhicitta. And then we started talking about the qualities of the bodhisattvas, how they help without even being asked, and how they feel so joyful doing that. And whenever, I hear that talk about how bodhisattvas are so happy when somebody says, please give me something, or I have a problem, can I talk to you? Or, it's like they get so overjoyed. They say it's happier than the arhats feel abiding in nirvana. Yeah. And it just reminds me, one time I was at Sarah Monastery with Geshe Jumpa Tekchok, and he had cooked dinner for us. He wouldn't let us serve him. He cooked dinner for us. And then he sat on the floor and made us sit on chairs. Yeah. And then in the middle of the meal, a beggar came. And Geshe-la just went up, and the beggar said something. Geshe-la went back in his room, came out with this very thick, warm blanket that they have in India, handed it over to the beggar. The beggar left. Geshe-la came and sat back down. And it was, it was like, yeah, oh, he needs a blanket, of course. No hesitation, just completely went and gave him this brand new blanket, being very happy. I would have thought, oh, he wants a blanket. Let's see, maybe I can give him a towel instead, or an old blanket, or tell him I don't have a blanket, but I have that new blanket and I don't want to give it away. So you can, you see things like that. It shows you where you're at. Okay. So we are on verse 34. So again, talking about how the bodhisattvas are praiseworthy. And in verse 34, it starts the discussion of why it's really not so cool to criticize bodhisattvas. Okay, so the verse said, the Buddha has said that whoever bears a harmful thought against a benefactor, such as a bodhisattva, will remain in hell for as many eons as there were harmful thoughts. Okay. So it's interesting that here they're calling Bodhisattva a benefactor. Usually we think of somebody who gives material goods as our benefactor, but the Bodhisattva benefactor is giving us the teachings, which are more important than material goods. Okay, so, if a Bodhisattva is working, since they're working for the benefit of all sentient beings, they have that motivation, and they're trying every action they do to make it in some way or another linked to bodhicitta and for the long or short term related to attaining awakening to benefit sentient beings. If we then interfere with their virtuous actions, it's not so good. It would be, you think with COVID going on, and I don't know, there's all the people working in these overcrowded hospitals to take care of people, and then we go in and press the fire alarm so everybody has to vacate and leave all the sick people there, or try and get them out, which creates, so much turmoil and pain and more suffering. If we're trying to sabotage the work of the doctors when the doctors are doing such good, helping so much for the patients, then that's, really going to create a lot of negative karma, because we're interfering with the virtuous actions of the medical staff. So in similar way, if bodhisattvas are doing certain things and we create interferences for them, it prevents the aid that they're giving to sentient beings from reaching those sentient beings. And so clearly it's going to be creating negative karma on our part. Okay. And so this happens not only by verbally and physically interfering with bodhisattva's deeds, but even thinking harmful thoughts about them, criticizing them, and so on. So this is, behind what they say we don't know who's a bodhisattva and who's not, so better not to criticize anybody. Yeah. So if you take that as a general thing, yeah, it is good. We shouldn't criticize people, because criticizing, implies that we have a mind motivated by affliction. We're jealous of the person, so we want to criticize. We're angry at what they did, so we want to criticize. Yeah, we desire something they have, so we criticize. Yeah. But I think if we look at it, criticism of a person is different than pointing out actions that don't seem so skillful. Because the reason I'm saying this is not that we should point out unskillful actions of bodhisattvas. I'm not advocating that, okay? But what I'm trying to do is dissect this instruction of, since we don't know who's a bodhisattva and who's not, then better not to criticize anybody, because unless you kind of dissect it, if you're somebody like me, what I come away with from that kind of thing is I shouldn't point out the faults of anybody. I shouldn't interfere when anybody's doing any kind of action, even if it seems like a negative action to me, because that person could be a bodhisattva. Okay, do you see how my mind kind of extrapolates and puts something on that instruction that may not be there? And I think what the part that isn't there is, first of all, because we see negative actions in the world, don't we? And we have to point them out and, try and remedy things that are not being done correctly, or harmful actions. So there's two things: discriminate between the person and the action, so we don't criticize the person. Yeah, if somebody is causing a lot of trouble and upsetting a lot of people or starting a war or, like that, we don't have to criticize the person. We can talk about the action and how it's harmful. And then also, criticizing, like I said, implies having a negative motivation. But instead of maybe criticizing the action, what we do is we point out the disadvantages of that action. So we're not allowing our mind to be motivated by affliction, but rather we're trying to clearly see the disadvantages of an action. Yeah. Because if you interpret it the way I did at the beginning, you wind up with your hands tied and your feet tied and watching all sorts of horrible things happening, but being afraid of saying anything because you might go to hell because you're criticizing a bodhisattva, even though you're wondering, why would a bodhisattva start a war or, make certain policies that harm so many people. But they did tell us in the scriptures that sometimes bodhisattvas do things that we can't understand with our ordinary intelligence. So just kind of keep quiet. But do you see what I mean, what the problem is? Yeah. So here, I think if we just separate the person and the action, and we don't criticize the action or the person, but we point out the disadvantages of the action. Yeah. Because really, it's the action that's the problem, and it doesn't really matter who's doing it. Yeah. Okay. In any case, we should be careful. Yeah. Because it does become clear that if we just, because we have a judgmental, critical mind, don't we? Yeah. And an opinionated, judgmental mind that is hyperactive. And, we can easily go around criticizing everyone and everything. And that doesn't work to our benefit. And it doesn't help others either. Okay. Yeah, so Gautama Jay gives us a quotation from the Sutra of the Seal, generating the power of faith about this. It generates much more countless negativity to generate a negative attitude and so forth towards a bodhisattva that aspires to the Mahayana than to destroy or burn stupas equaling the number of sand grains in the Ganges. So that's a lot of negative karma that you create. Okay. And in Shantideva, when we get to chapter 6, he goes kind of into the mathematics of sending yourself to hell for criticizing a bodhisattva. Yeah, but this is all done not it's done so that we realize the danger and become cautious, okay? And it's important that we understand why they're saying that, because otherwise it sounds like threat. Yeah, we're getting threatened with going to hell if we criticize a bodhisattva, And when we interpret it as a threat like that, what's happening is our Judeo-Christian background is interrupting there. And we think that there's some external being who we are displeasing, who will then punish us by sending us to hell. And that's not at all what the story is in Buddhism. Yeah, nobody's punishing us, nobody's sending us to hell. They're just saying this to tell us about karma and inform us about karma. Okay. And then when I went to His Holiness in doing this series of books, and I asked him, because there's a lot of these kind of things, yeah? And, one moment of negative thought, how many moments in hell? And one, if you say 10 Namo Amitofos, you'll be born in the Pure Land. And, one recitation of this mantra will purify eons of rebirth in the hell realm. And, kind of extraordinary things. So, but especially the ones that talk about the negative karma and the results of those. And I said, are we supposed to understand this literally? And His Holiness said, well, it's kind of like Buddha's propaganda. He loves using that word. And he said, if it is like this in a negative way, that so many moments of negative thought results in a rebirth in hell, then it's also going to be that way in terms of the virtuous actions. Okay, that so many positive thoughts about bodhisattvas will ripen in that many eons worth of good rebirths. Okay, so he said, we have to balance things. If we say something about negative karma, it has to be equal for positive. And similarly, if we say something about positive karma, it has to be the same for negative. And, in terms of, saying this many mantra and then never getting reborn in the lower realms, His Holiness said, well, if that were true, then why did the Buddha teach the Dharma for so many years? And why are there 84,000 teachings if all you need to do is say one mantra one time? Okay, so he, came back to what is reasonable there. But you can see how such statements in the scriptures, they may not inspire us or produce caution on our part. They may produce terror and panic on our part, which isn't the designed response. That's not what the Buddha's wanting us to feel in response to these comments. You can see how for some people, hearing it like that may wake them up enough that it helps them abandon those actions. And in terms of the positive things, saying, this mantra 3 times and you never get born in the hell realms or whatever, how for some people that can really enthuse them for practice. Okay, so even if a certain way of saying things doesn't fit our mind, or, because of our culture and our namtok, our preconceptions, it could be suitable for somebody else's mind. Okay, so it's very good to remember that so that we don't start thinking, well, the Buddha didn't know what he was talking about. He should have expressed it this way instead of that way, because there's so many sentient beings and they all have different ways of understanding. And so he gives different teachings, different strokes for different folks. Okay, so different teachings according to the mentality of the people. Okay, and remembering that is very, very helpful because it stops, again, the judgmental, critical mind. Yeah, and it also stops the mind that says, well, I want them to say the Dharma the way I want to hear it, instead of realizing that we need to think about the teachings ourselves and figure out what they mean. Okay. Okay, so that was 34. Then we go to 35. Okay, so the reason why it is suitable to meditate on faith. So that's the first 2 lines of 35. However, if a virtuous attitude should arise in that regard, its fruits will multiply far more than that. Okay, so it's the same thing he's saying here. If you, have a virtuous mind and you praise bodhisattvas, and you have high regard for their actions, again, the result is going to keep increasing and be pretty great. Okay, and then the last 2 lines of 35. When bodhisattvas greatly suffer, they generate no negativity. Instead, their virtues naturally increase. Whoa! Really? How about us? When we suffer, when we suffer, do we generate no negativity such that our virtues naturally increase? When you're suffering mentally or physically, do we remember to practice? Do we even try and generate a virtuous attitude? When our life, there's, somebody criticizes us, or, somebody betrays our trust, do we remember to practice? When we're in great pain, physical pain, do we remember to practice? And so here again we see, okay, look how the bodhisattvas handle these situations. Okay, so even if there's very strong suffering mentally or physically, they don't get all upset and bent out of shape and blame other people and have a fit about it. They don't yell and scream and write horrible comments on the YouTube page. Okay. Instead, they practice the Dharma, and then their virtue increases naturally. Okay. So it's, it's good to remember that. And especially, when we read negative comments on the YouTube page, think these people are suffering, and what kind of karma are they creating? I read some of the ones from the recent BBC, and they didn't even apply to the topic of the BBC. So it's really perplexing, but you can see that if somebody has such anger, first of all, they're quite miserable, and second of all, they're really creating a lot of negativity. Okay, so we should remember that kind of thing when we face difficult situations, and instead of allowing our mind to go south like that, to remember to practice. And here's where the thought training teachings are so effective. And this is why, we recite the 8 verses, the 37 practices, because if we can remember those verses, then when we have problems, the answers are right there in the verse. The problem is, one, we forget we forget that it's possible to transform our mind when we're suffering. We just go into our old habits, okay? And then if we think, I could practice Dharma now, then all of a sudden we go, well, what am I supposed to practice? How am I supposed to think? And all the teachings that we've heard are like out of our mind. It's like our mind is totally blank. And I can't think, what am I supposed to practice like now? So this is why it's so important to practice these teachings in our meditation sessions and really think of situations that have happened to us or that could happen or are happening. And in on the cushion, imagine those situations and then imagine thinking as these various verses and thought training techniques teach us to think, and really work at it, kind of really, I guess it's like a cow has to chew a cud for a really long time to get it soft. So, we have to chew on these thought training things to get them into our mind. Okay, but it's amazing, and to me it's incredibly inspiring to think that you can actually arrive at a place like these bodhisattvas, where even when you are experiencing suffering, your mind doesn't have negativity in it, and you instead create virtue. Yeah. And when you do that, what you're doing is you're cutting the karmic reverberations. Okay, so if we don't practice, then somebody's mean to me, I get angry. I either dwell in my negativity with malice, creating mental non-virtue. I say something mean to the other person, creating verbal non-virtue, or I do something to sabotage their happiness, creating physical non-virtue. And then I create more cause for my own suffering by doing this. Whereas in the same exact situation, if I remember to practice thought training, then I cut that whole thing. And instead of experiencing the result of suffering, creating the cause for more suffering, I simply experience the result of suffering and stop that whole mechanism. Yeah. And by doing that, I actually have less suffering in the moment as well. Okay, because when we practice thought training, then we look at the same situation in a different way, and it's amazing what happens when we just change our thought. Yeah, have you noticed that sometimes? Does the external situation or what's happening in your body exactly the same, but you change your thought, and your whole experience is different. Yeah. And you didn't even have to move your little finger. You just sit there. Yeah. It's really kind of like magic. Mm-hmm. So 36, this is the last verse in the chapter. I bow down to the body of those in whom the sacred, precious mind is born. I seek refuge in that source of joy, who brings happiness even to those who bring harm. Okay, so here we're bowing to those who have the bodhicitta, so, who have that bodhicitta, and we take refuge in them, because, and taking refuge doesn't mean they're going to save us, or how, it does not mean, they're going to sweep down and pick us up, and save us, but it means how they, quote, quote, save us is by teaching us the Dharma, and that gives us the possibility to practice and save ourselves, okay? So we're calling them a source of joy, and because they bring happiness even to those who harm them. So they don't retaliate when they experience harm, they instead work for the benefit of that person. Okay, so we're bowing, we're taking refuge in them. And when we do that, we're making a close connection with these holy beings. And that close connection is very important to us. for many reasons. First of all, if we have that respect and feeling of closeness to them, that creates the karma to meet with holy beings who will give us these teachings. And it also inspires us to become like them and to trust the teachings they give us. Yeah. And again, it's like when we listen to teachings, we can listen with an open mind or we can listen with a closed mind. Yeah. So we can hear the thought training teachings and go, oh, yeah, right. Or we can go, oh, I should try that. Yeah. Situation is the same. How we respond makes a big difference. Yeah, because the person in the first case, they're there, they have access to the teacher, the teachings, doesn't benefit them at all. Yeah, second person, even they hear a little bit, they're really going to take it to heart and benefit from it. So then Gyaltsab Je writes a kind of a summary of the highlights of the first chapter, which is, it's good to kind of, I think, summarize a chapter because it helps us remember the part that came before. So whether we practice Sutrayana or Tantrayana, it's a Mahayana practice, and the door to the Mahayana practice is the generation of bodhicitta. Okay, so it's very important for us as practitioners, if we want to pursue the path to full awakening, that we generate bodhicitta. Okay, and then to start out on the path, we have to practice the path in common with the initial level being and with the medium level being. So those were briefly covered also in this chapter. Okay, in doing so, we have to purify our mind of negativities. So that will come in the next two chapters and create a lot of merit, which will also come in the next two chapters. And those two things of purification and accumulation of merit, that's what softens and moistens our minds so that we can really take the teachings in. When I was first beginning, my first Kopan course, there was one nun, and I wanted to learn what the mandala offering meant. So I asked her to teach me, and how to tangle your fingers up in the right position and everything like that. And so she was teaching me this, and I said, why do we do these practices? What is it? How is it beneficial? And then she talked a little bit from her own experience. This was Elizabeth. And she said, when your mind is kind of stuck in your practice and you just feel resistant, you feel like you're listening to teachings but nothing's going in, or your mind is tight or kind of in a bad mood, she said, do these practices. Yeah. Instead of just pushing with your studies at that time and trying to, how we push, there's no final exam you don't have to cram for the final exam. So she said, just pause and do more practices of purification and accumulation merit, because she says it softens the mind. Yeah. So these are more practices that create faith or devotion, but they work in a different way, And I was always suspect of those kind of practices. In the religion I grew up in, all the devotional kind of praise stuff, offering stuff, is like, if God is really that great, why do I need to praise him bolster his ego and give him presents. And, none of that made any kind of sense to me. But when the meaning of doing those kind of practices in Buddhism was explained, and then when I started doing those practices and experiencing the result, then it really began to make some sense and be very helpful. Especially one nun telling me about her own experience and what she does. Okay, and then Gyaltsab Je writes, just remember when we studied the 400, how we were going through Gyaltsab Je's commentary on that, and how at the end of each chapter he wrote a concluding verse. So he does that here too. So for the first chapter, he says, those that know they have attained a human body with freedoms and fortunes, meditate with effort on the two bodhicittas. This is the supreme taking the essence of the freedoms and fortunes. Initially meditate on the benefits of that mind. So first he placed it, you have freedoms and fortunes. Okay, then he placed it in the framework of the entire path. Practice the two bodhicittas. But what you first need to do is meditate on the benefits of bodhicitta. So it's interesting how he put the different thoughts in that verse together. Okay. Now we go on to chapter 2. In the Fedor's translation, he also listed the 22 kinds of bodhicitta. They're also in volume 5. So chapter 2 is called Purifying Negativities. Okay, so it's an explanation of the practices of refuge, making offerings, prostrations, and purifying with the 4 opponent powers. Okay, so that's what this chapter is going to be about. So first he's going to talk about the need of making offerings, and then go into the whole practice of offering, talking about all the different kinds of things we can offer. So substances that aren't owned, those that refers to things in nature. Because I think at the time of the Buddha, there was a lot of land that was not owned. Now try and find some land that's not owned. Every small piece of sand belongs to somebody. But at that time, there were huge swaths of land between one settlement and another, and nobody claimed it, everybody enjoyed it. So nature is kind of the thing that is not owned. Then he's going to talk about offerings that are emanated, and then common offerings, so, actual things we can give. So then we'll go into the description of offering a bath to the Buddhas. You might say, why in the world are we offering a bath to the Buddhas? Isn't that a little bit risque? And anyway, they don't have bodies like us, so they don't have to take a bath. And even if they did, can't they take a shower themselves? So the actual meaning of bathing the Buddhas is the Buddha is symbolizing the nature of our mind, our Buddha potential. Okay, the natural Buddha potential, the transforming Buddha potential, and we are washing away the negativities from that. So that's how we think, even though the visualization is offering a bath to the Buddhas. Okay, so it's really kind of, it's funny, you read it and it's kind of like you're taking the Buddhas into a spa, a really expensive spa at one of Trump's golf courses, and offering a bath, because where else are you going to get a bath like this, you know? So it's really, yeah. Okay, then he'll go into prostrations, physical homage, physical prostrations, and then into the four opponent powers. Okay, and so we know the four opponent powers. We start out with regret, yeah, and then the power of, I call it, amending the relationship. They call it the power of the base. So whoever we offended, generating a positive attitude in relation to them. Then the power of the antidote, of doing an antidotal action, and the power of making a determination not to do those things again. Okay, and so it's necessary to do all these things, because I really like the analogy that our mind is like a field, and I'm sure Venerable Semke and Deki can give us lessons about how to plant things in a field, and Venerable Nima also. And so first you need to take out the stones and the bubble gum wrappers and anything else that's been left there that's going to interfere with growing. And then you need to add some fertilizer. And after that, because those two things are preparing the soil, after you do that, then you plant the seeds. Okay? If you plant the seeds before clearing the land properly and fertilizing it, the seeds may be great, but they're not going to grow. Okay? So we prepare the land, then we plant the seeds. Planting the seeds is like listening to teachings. And then we practice. Yeah? And so, the rain falls, the summer comes, things warm up, and the sprouts grow. And so we begin to have understanding of the teachings and experience of them. Okay, so before we take the Bodhisattva vow, we really need to purify the mind and create merit. And you'll see how His Holiness, when he gave it a few days, a couple of weeks ago online, remember we did all this recitation beforehand? So he usually has us either recite recite chapter 2 and parts of chapter 3 of this text for purifying and creating merit before taking the Bodhisattva vow, or he has us do part of the Samantabhadra prayer, the king of prayers. Okay. So, and then there's other ways of doing it too, but the same thing with purification, accumulation of merit. Okay, so that's important before taking the Bodhisattva vow. And then before we do those practices, we should clean the place where we're practicing. So remember in the when we were studying, earlier in approaching the Buddhist, in Foundation of the Buddhist Practice, it talked about the 6 preparations, and it starts out with cleaning the room and setting up the altar and, going into taking refuge and the 7 limb prayer and the request and things like that, okay? So a similar kind of thing here as being taught in Lamrim. Okay, so this is under the big heading of the way of training and the practices upon generation of the 2 bodhicittas. I would think it's in preparation to generate the 2 bodhicittas. Okay. So, and then the sub heading, confessing the disruptive conditions, the negativities, by way of the complete four powers, after having done the preliminaries of prostrating, offering, and going for refuge. Okay, so we start verse 1, which is talking about the need to make offerings. Yeah. So Shantideva says, in order to seize that precious mind of bodhicitta, I now offer to the Tathagatas, to the sacred Dharma, the stainless jewel, and to the disciples of the Buddha, the oceans of excellence. So first, who are you making offerings to? Okay. Well, why are you making offerings? First, when it says to seize that precious mind, it means to generate bodhicitta. Yeah, so we want to accumulate merit. We want to offer to the Tathagatas, so the Buddha jewel, to the sacred Dharma. Sacred Dharma is referring to the last two of the four truths, so true cessations and true paths, because when we actualize that, then our mind transforms into the actual Dharma refuge. And to the disciples of the Buddha, referring here specifically to the Arhats, it's good to include, not the Arhats, it refers specifically to the Bodhisattvas, but it's good to include the Arhats. And when His Holiness gives the Bodhisattva vow, he publicly to a lot of people, he usually says, all the lineage lamas of all the Buddhist traditions. Or if you follow another Buddhist tradition in addition to the Tibetan, add the lineage lamas from that tradition. Yeah. So very helpful that way. And it's rather interesting when you look at the lineage lamas from other traditions, you find out that Nagarjuna, Vasubandhu, Asanga are in the lineage lamas of the Chinese Chan and Pure Land traditions. Yeah. And, many other of the Indian sages that we hold in common. Okay, so, why are we making offerings? Generate bodhicitta. Who are we offering to? The three jewels. Okay. And now, the actual offering practice. So it starts out with offering substances that are not owned. So these refer to the things in nature. I particularly like this section personally. And you may find that particular parts of the offerings you really like, they really appeal to you. But I love offering beautiful things in nature. And he goes into a description of those a little bit later on. He starts out first, whatever flowers and fruits there are, and whatever kinds of medicine, whatever jewels exist in the world, and whatever clean, refreshing waters. Okay, so flowers, really in your mind, imagine all sorts of beautiful flowers. Now when we're walking around the Abbey, there's so many flowers. So even when you're walking around, mentally offer everything. And even though it doesn't say the grass is even beautiful now. It's so high and so bright green, offer that. And all the fruits. So all the lettuce that we're growing, yeah. Then the little strawberries. But also in your imagination, really think of the fruits that you especially like and make them big and beautiful, completely organic, no peels and no seeds, okay? And so you really make them, when you imagine, make them better than they actually are in our world. And then whatever kinds of medicine. I like this one too, offering medicine, because, when you think of so much suffering in the world, and if we had medicine for all these different things, how wonderful that would be. So you can think of homeopathic medicine, Tibetan medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, Western medicine, all the different kinds of medicine. And you can, I think now it's especially good to think of offering medicine for COVID-19. Of all the things that could go wrong in the body, COVID-19 is one small thing. Yeah, I mean, our body can break down in so many ways and have so many diseases. But since this is the one that is, really occupying people's minds now, I think imagining offering various medicines that would cure that disease and a vaccine would, it would aid in creating the karma for that to happen. Yeah, my sister is a bit concerned. Her boyfriend and his roommate both tested positive. And my niece, her daughter, my niece. Okay. No. So my niece, her boyfriend and the boyfriend's roommate both tested positive. And my niece is a flight attendant. Yeah. So, yeah. So she's a bit nervous about that. And, we're kind of, I was going to say we're all, aware of that threat. And then I think, no, there's a lot of people in this country who just aren't thinking about it at all. Yeah. I was reading some of the letters in the Minor. Yeah, really shocking. The letters to the editor, what they're publishing. I'm surprised people write it, and I'm surprised the Minor publishes some of these letters. But one of them, the guy was saying that he thinks COVID-19 is a big hoax that acts as a facade for the government to control people. And that it's a method to bring in, authoritarian control. He's saying not to wear a mask and accusing saying that this is all a government plot to limit our liberty. Huh? There's no end to delusion. No, there isn't, but I'm really surprised the newspaper is publishing that. I'm wondering if the people in our local newspaper believe that, or if they're just short on letters to the editor. If maybe we should write a letter to the editor, and talk about people coming together and helping each other. And, it's a small sacrifice. And yes, it's uncomfortable, but I'm happy to help my neighbor not get sick. Maybe we should write a letter. And somebody want to draft a letter and put some positive energy in this community instead of, that's scary to think. But, so medicines for physical disease, medicine for mental discomfort also, because, that's the pandemic is definitely having an effect on people's minds. Of course, Dharma is the best medicine. I'm not advocating that everybody, get mental prescriptions for anxiety and so forth, but we can think of maybe nourishing food that help people have a healthy body so they have a healthy mind. Yeah, because food is a kind of medicine too. Okay, whatever jewels exist in the world and clean, refreshing waters. This very important to think too when our waters on this planet are getting so polluted. And, who wants to offer the the Buddha, the Ganges River now, it's like, yeah, it's, let's really think of pure water and how difficult it is to find pure water. It's very difficult, because you may think it's pure, but there's insecticides in it. There's nitrates from cattle or horses being on the land. So difficult to find that kind of water. So we can imagine it too. Verse 3, likewise, gem-encrusted mountains, forest groves, quiet and joyful places, heavenly trees bedecked with flowers, and trees with fruit-laden branches. Okay, gem-encrusted mountains. I wonder what that would look like. Yeah, that you can imagine, the sides of mountains with all kinds of jewels and so forth glittering from them. Forest groves, we don't have to imagine that, but we can imagine them without being overcrowded, and without knapweed, and without beetles, and, really healthy forest groves, quiet and joyful places, which we are so fortunate to have here. I mean, how much does a walk in the forest for us settle the mind? And really open the mind and calm the body. It really works magic, I think, in many, many ways, compared to living in a city and all you can do is walk on asphalt, or the most green you get is a park, but then there's tons of people in the park. And here, we can just go wander in the forest, and he doesn't list it in this verse. Birds come in later, there's geese in verse 5, but the birds here, so I always think of birds as dakas and dakinis, and we have so many different kinds of birds, and it's so wonderful to hear them talk to each other, and our ravens they have kind of a big meeting once a week and really get it all out. Do you hear them? They're, often right behind and they invite their friends over, and I don't know if it's the Republican conference or the Democrat conference, but they're really going at it. Okay, and then they kind of fly away and settle down again. But, we have the wrens and the robins and the chickadees and all sorts of friends, here surrounding us. And very sweet, watching them fly around, and the swallows too fly into bushes, and then they all fly out of the bush at one time. The other day, I stepped out onto the deck of my cabin, and all of a sudden there was like whoosh, and there's baby turkeys flying all over the place. And Mama Turkey standing there going, oh no, how do I get them all together again? Because some flew this way and that way, and some were just walking on the path up the hill, kind of thinking, Mom doesn't know where we are. We can go do something interesting now. But just the number of beings that we share the land with. And, they're part of our community. They're living beings who want to be happy and not suffer. Okay, heavenly trees bedecked with flowers. We have that too. So many of the trees in the forest are flowering now. I hope you get some pictures of them, especially the roses. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're so beautiful. Okay, so we can think of the things that we have, but this is especially in your mind. You build you build this beautiful habitat, okay? And you think that the habitat is conducive for your Dharma practice. Okay, so you see the flowers and you think of virtue. The birds, they're all teaching us the Dharma. Yeah, they're saying Omani Pemi Hum in their own language and teaching us the Dharma. The wind, the breezes, are teaching us impermanence. So, you can make up your own symbols or use the traditional symbols, but it's important here you really visualize beauty. And when you visualize beauty like this, your mind reacts. Yeah, your mind becomes happy. It becomes joyful. And again, what's remarkable about this is you could be sitting in a dungeon, but if you visualize beauty, your whole mind gets transformed. Whereas you can be in a beautiful place, but if you're angry or upset or in a bad mood, you feel like you're in a dungeon. Okay, for fragrances of the celestial realms, that don't contain chemicals, so they don't make you sick. So everybody can come and enjoy. Incense, so nice, sweet-smelling incense. Wishing trees, and so they have this thing in Indian culture, wish-fulfilling trees that you can go to and make any wish you want, and it will bring it about. Jewel trees, so trees, with jewels. In the autumn here, when the leaves are turning, it's kind of like they're jewels. Just the colors are so magnificent. Uncultivated harvests that grow, you don't need a tractor, you don't need to attach the what do you call it, the harrow to the end of the tractor. They just grow by themselves. No lopping or pruning. Yeah, no lopping or pruning. Okay, all ornaments. So if you're really into jewelry, you can imagine all the jewelry that you think is so beautiful. That one never sparks me, but for some people I imagine, it does. So all ornaments that are worthy of being offered. So all those kind of beautiful things. Okay, and trees with fruit-laden branches. So that comes later in the season, but we can start to visualize them now. Okay, so remember, no pits, no no chemicals, no peels. And they make all the apples chop themselves up and make themselves into applesauce. All the peaches, no pits, no skins. They make into jars. You can can them, but I think better peaches that you don't have to can, that stay fresh over the winter. Okay, so you just make, everything as beautiful and, what you would like to enjoy and what you want other people to enjoy. Okay, and then verse 5, lakes and pools adorned with lotuses. So on hot days, having lakes and pools and beautiful flowers in them. They're not polluted. There's no algae. The turtles in them won't bite you. So just beautiful places where you can be. Yeah. the beautiful cry of wild geese, everything unowned within the limitless spheres of space. Yes, you can also offer all the planets, all the solar systems, because everybody finds beauty in something different. I mean, if you're an astronomer, you probably think that, the dirt on Mars is just incredibly fascinating and beautiful. Okay, so we imagine all these things in the limit, within the limits of space, which means unlimited. And then 6, creating these things in my mind. Okay, so this is mental creation. I offer them to supreme beings, the Buddhas, as well as to their heirs, the Bodhisattvas. O compassionate ones, think kindly of me and accept these offerings of mine. Okay, this translation says, may those with holy qualities and great compassion consider me with affection and enjoy these offerings of mind. Okay, so the idea is we give all these things and we're creating a relationship with the holy beings. And so they're going to look kindly at us and look at us with affection, not because we've given them visualized plums, okay, or things like that. But I mean, that's their nature, to look at sentient beings with affection and kindness and so on. But I think it works in a psychological way that we feel worthy of their affection if we make offerings. Okay? So psychologically, when we give people presents, it establishes a relationship with them. So it's not like, I gave them a present so they should like me. I'm not talking about that. But we give somebody a gift, it establishes a relationship, it makes a connection. So it's the same way with the holy beings, So we imagine them, we imagine all these beautiful things, and then we offer them. So the nice thing about being able to imagine is that we don't need to be wealthy to make a lot of offerings. We can just do it in our mind. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't make actual offerings. We should make actual offerings as we're able to. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I remember hearing in one of it was either a sociology or a psychology class, that when we gift things to people, that in our mind we immediately like them. So there is this association with liking and giving a gift, and so it just reinforces that over and over again, that we like them.
Yeah. So it's not bribing them to like us. It's reinforcing in our mind that we appreciate and like them. And so that makes a big difference, especially in our spiritual practice. Yeah. So some people like making tons of actual offerings, and they really, really get into it. Other people like doing visualized offerings. Other people of beautiful objects. Other people prefer to offer their Dharma practice. So there's many different ways of making offerings. And it's nice to do a little bit of all of them. But some of us are more attractive to one thing or another. Yeah. And so we may be attracted to one method of offering more than another way, but let's not criticize the people who are attracted to another way. Okay. By saying, oh, why do they do that? And they're spending so much money on those, things. Why are they doing that? Well, it affects their mind. Like she was saying, when we give a present, it makes us like them. So that's how they reaffirm their relationship and their faith in the Buddha Dharma Sangha is to offer all these things. And they really feel so happy afterwards. It's amazing, when they have like long life pujas or big offering ceremonies in the Tibetan community. They really go to it. My goodness, it's but people feel so happy, and even you aren't part of the group that's sponsoring the puja, you just feel happy offering all these things to His Holiness. Everybody there feels happy. Yeah.
It's not just gift giving, but also doing something nice for the person. Anything nice, a favor, whatever.
Yeah.
It acts the same way.
Yeah. So doing a favor for somebody reinforces that our relationship with them, that is one of affection and kindness and closeness. Yeah.
How can Buddhas and Bodhisattvas actually help us? Can they take a human body to help others, or just their presence is healing? Can they help somehow by asking them to help us?
Yeah, they can manifest in human bodies. Yeah. And act in this world to benefit sentient beings, but we don't know who they are. Okay. And that's part of the skill in which they act to benefit sentient beings. They maybe they can intercede in certain situations. In situations of extreme danger or things like that. Yeah, depending on the karma of the people involved. They might be able to manifest as a blanket if you're cold or something like that. But the deeper way in which they benefit us is by teaching us the Dharma, because when we practice that, then we will go towards the end of dukkha, the end of suffering. Yeah. So giving us a blanket or some medicine or something is helpful at that time. But the big help is by leading us on the path.
Just thinking about this idea of unowned offerings, because I seem to recall hearing that it is inappropriate for us to offer something that doesn't belong to us. So then it's a little uncomfortable. Like if you see somebody's garden, and they have all these beautiful flowers, it would be nice to be able to mentally offer all those beautiful flowers to the Buddha, but on the other hand, they don't belong to me, they belong to these people.
I think
is that inappropriate?
No, mental offering, it doesn't matter who it belongs to, because you're not taking it yourself. It's not wrong livelihood in any way. And
then another somewhat related question is, I'm trying to think of where there are beautiful things that aren't owned, because, for example, we call it national parks like Yellowstone, Yosemite, and so on. They are owned by the government.
Yeah.
So,
By the U.S. people.
By us.
Yeah, by us.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's appropriate. It's okay.
But
we're not creating bad karma.
Yeah. Well, it's only a fraction of it is owned by us personally. Because there's many U.S. citizens, but the point is, there's a difference between mentally offering and actual offering. So actual offering, we don't want to take anything that's not ours. We don't want to pick flowers from somebody else's garden without asking them. But mentally, we can offer them. That's fine. We can even offer the other person's house. As long as it's mental like that, that's fine.
So we can offer first castle.
Yeah. Although what the Buddha would do with it, I don't know.
Regarding pollution and the climate and climate change, if humans destroy the earth and themselves so no precious human rebirth is possible, will the Dharma survive?
Yeah, there's many places in this universe where there's life. The earth is one tiny speck of dust in the universe. Yeah, there's many places with life, many different kinds of realms. So, and if the beings there have created the karma to hear the teachings, the Buddha undoubtedly will manifest there and teach. Okay, so we'll close now.